All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. So in today's episode, we're out here in beautiful South Florida. We got an early start this morning. The mosquitoes are out, and it's actually really brutal right now. Today, we're gonna be using artificials only. On this channel, we tend to only use artificial baits. I got my estuary lures, rattle traps, and the one thing I am missing today is my mirror lures, but it's not the end of the world. So we're gonna be traveling all through this lagoon, looking for any snook or tarpon that we could sight fish or just blind cast at these mangroves. That usually works relatively well out here. And once again, we woke up around 4 in the morning and we got here at around 6:30. Real early start. I'm expecting big things for today. Stay tuned and I'll see you guys later.
One of the coolest things about today, I think personally, was how we pulled up to a random spot that we hadn't really tried in a long time. I know we had been to the area a few times here and there, but it was really cool to keen on new fish. We didn't know they were going to be so small per se, but it did remind me of bass fishing in a sense. You know, we went out there, we got on some nice snook, we jumped a few tarpon. Sadly, we didn't opt out with our treble hooks. And I kind of want to touch base on that too.
Well, I mean, with the treble hooks, that's because last time that we actually did it, we landed them all on treble hooks. Mind you, we were using the, which one was it? It was the mirror?
Mirror lure, yeah.
We were using the mirror lure, little shiner-like ones.
Right.
And we were able to do pretty good hook sets on those, honestly.
Yeah.
So
and that was the Miro Dean, right? By Mirror Lure, I believe so.
Yeah, I want to say it was.
It was the Miro Dean.
I'm just the camera guy.
So, one of the cool things about the kind of fishing that we were doing off there inshore, it's usually a lot more action-packed, and sometimes we're getting on some bigger tarpon. Like the other day when we went out there, I think we landed like 3 slots in one day. A lot of cool stuff happened. It was something that we didn't really.
You're talking about the snook.
The 2 or 3 snooks that we caught that one day.
Snook,
I think we caught one doing our little unconventional method of trolling.
Yeah.
Human power on the canoe. And you know, that's another thing. Like, we're out there on a canoe. We don't have a trolling motor with us. We like to be as quiet and as raw as possible when we're out there.
And it's one of those weird things, because what works to your advantage in the sense of paddling and exhaustion ends up being your enemy at the end of the day. So what was it that you were saying earlier about the whole, the fact that there was no current, in a sense?
Right, okay. So we go out there, you know, very early in the morning. And you always want calm conditions, just because who doesn't want to? When you're kayaking, when you're paddling, you want calm conditions. Yeah. You don't want to be fighting with, you know, Mother Nature all day. But it got to the point where it was almost impossible to really find any source of current to get these fish biting, and to kind of get something a little bit more than just the occasional little, you know, snook hanging out in the mangroves.
Yeah, they were there, but they weren't as aggressive.
Right.
Like, again, this area, it was a new area to us.
Right.
But we were in the general vicinity. We just went to a different stretch of that part.
Right. And that's something that I would like to tell, like, you know, all these viewers who are out there, you know, trying new areas. It's always good to explore, because how are you going to find those, you know, honey holes and those cool spots that you normally would just, you know, hey, let's go to that, you know, that spot that provided last week, and we caught, you know, 2 slot snook or whatever it might have been.
Fishing, in a sense, it's
exploration,
hit or miss, dude.
Right?
It's like sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But I mean, the fact that you're out there in the water,
right?
That's like.
And then, you know, to touch base a little bit more on what we did in this episode. It reminded me a lot of bass fishing in a sense. So, you know, we go out there, we go bass fishing every now and then. And it was basically the same exact lures, you know, minus the worms and the Senkos, and, you know, wacky rigging worms, stuff like that. It was basically the same thing with the hard plastics. When I'm going bass fishing and I'm trying to get a top mid-water bite, I would probably use those same exact lures. The Miro lure, we didn't have the Miro lure this episode, but the estuaries, all of the Rapalas, that's the same exact tackle that I would bring to Okeechobee per se, or any freshwater lake for that matter.
It's that it kind of reminds me, a couple weeks back, I showed you the pictures. I didn't have any footage of it, but I was using a deep diving bass lure while I was trolling out in the dry Tortugas, and like, shockingly enough, like, that thing was able to catch a couple bonita and a small black tuna.
Right.
So it's just like the fact that it's like they work so well.
Right.
It's all in. It's literally all
I think it's
in
the
how
motion.
The display.
Right.
It's the
It's
display.
the
And
motion.
the motion. Exactly.
It's the shiny aspect to these lures that are really bringing them out of the mangroves. And on a day that was so calm like today, you know, obviously we were in an area where it's protected by a couple mangroves, and it's very easy to get out of the current and out of the wind. But when it's that dead calm, it's really smart to use what we were basically using, something shiny, something that makes a lot of noise and attracts attention. But the current wasn't there, and the fish just weren't biting on this specific day. One other thing that I wanted to talk about was basically the difference between the other times that we've gone in that general vicinity. Not the same exact area, but we've been to that area, and it was just completely different conditions, but we produced larger fish. Not actually more fish, but larger fish.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, man, it's all hit or miss, and the fact that we were able to catch more while actually trolling from the slip that we got out of,
I found that
like
incredible.
to the spot. That's the part that it just boggles me.
Right.
So that shows that they, instead of, because it was so calm,
Right.
instead of
And the
actually
thing is, you go out there and you're doing everything the right way, everything the way you're supposed to. We woke up at 4 in the morning. You woke up at 3 something in the morning.
At 3, loaded up
the canoe, brought it over. Headed over to my house, and we were out. The area that we went fishing today was basically, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where we live. So we really did put all our eggs in one basket and say, hey, look, we're going all out. We did everything the right way. We were actually sitting in the car waiting for the sun to come up because of how dark it was when we first got out there.
That was pitch black. I mean, but that's also like that's the exciting part of it. You're out there, you get to the spot, and then it's just like we were trying to see if we can rest a little bit, honestly, but we were frankly just talking about seeing what it is that we can catch out there.
Right.
And honestly, it wasn't a letdown. The fact that we jumped a few tarpon, that
always gets the blood pumping. So the thing about the tarpon, and I say it all the time, you'll jump 5 or 6 juvie tarpon, and all of a sudden you hook up on that 80-pounder. Sometimes those aren't jumping as often as those juvies are.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, although the fight is much harder on those 80-pound, 100-plus tarpon, like the one we hooked up with Nico out in Key Biscayne.
Different Nico,
not the same Nico. Out in Key Biscayne, it was an amazing fight. It almost felt like I was stuck on the bottom. But he jumped like probably once or twice. Gave me enough time. Oh, you see the line coming up, enough time to go point my rod and say, hey, he's probably going to jump now. Let me get my rod out. With these smaller tarpon, it's almost impossible to predict when they're going to jump.
They're just so charged of energy.
They're full of energy. They remind me of those bigger ones that are just, you'll fight them for hours and you still can't get them.
They have that fight or flight sensation. So it's just like you can be on it for 10 seconds and that thing would have jumped already like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, and I think they call them the Silver King just because of how jam-packed on energy they really are. And it's just, they're so hard to keep a hook in their mouth.
Pound for pound, that honestly has to be one of the stronger fighting fish out there, especially when you're doing backcountry, like the way that we're doing it.
Right.
Because the snook, like you were saying, like the snook's mainly something it'll fight like a largemouth or something.
It's like a glorified largemouth bass.
Yeah,
that's the best way I would label it.
Still puts up more of a fight, but
for sure. And the main difference between the snook and tarpon is, we didn't see those big snook that we saw last time we were out there. But even with these little snook, it does remind me of catching a largemouth bass. And they do act the same exact way. They'll bob their heads above the water, but they won't fully, commit to 2 consecutive jumps. It's more of just like a nice little jump here and then cruise along the weeds and try to kind of hide away or look for the mangroves. The same way a bass would go towards like a tree structure.
What do you tell me about that bonus sea trout that we caught too while trolling out the canoe?
That was incredible. That was actually crazy. So the funny thing about that, at least that I thought, was we're spending the whole entire day throwing lures. It was hot, just like it's super hot right now. Down here in South Florida, we don't get a break from the sun. But I thought that was incredible. Throwing the Yozeri behind us, trolling, human power. We don't have a trolling motor, so we're out there just grinding, and all of a sudden we get a nice little keeper sea trout there. I thought that was incredible.
I still can't wrap my head around it. The fact, so we were out there probably, what was it, 5-6 hours, something like that?
Yeah,
just working along the mangroves.
Yeah, we got out there, I think we dropped the boat like at 7 something, because we had waited, we'd done the intro.
It was like, at that little moment, the sun is just starting to break out. That's when we started unloading everything, getting everything set up, and just there. But then, what is it? We came back like around 3.
Yeah, I think we were back at the house by 4 or 5. So we probably pulled up to the dock like at 3 something. 250 it was. 230, 250.
That's what it was. Yeah. So we were out there for a good portion of the morning, and it's the fact that it was in around midday when we already started paddling back. We were just like, dude, let's just troll it behind us. What do we got to lose?
Exactly. I think the biggest reason why we decided to troll that bait was mostly because we were out there looking for that bigger fish.
Yeah.
It just didn't show up today. It wasn't like the other days that we had gone out and got on those slots. And I think it was just like our last chance of hope. We had done it before, it worked. I've seen people on fishing kayaks, actually they'll do the outriggers. They'll put one rod in the other and another in the other and just kind of paddle as fast as possible and see if they could get a bite. And it was like our last shot of hope there.
It's also the fact that you guys don't understand the time frame that went on here. The second we hooked the first snook, go, dehook it, toss it back in, toss it back out. No exaggeration, within 30, 50 seconds, we were already hooked on another snook, honestly.
Right.
And that to me was just like...
It was wild.
It's that we were getting more action in that 1 minute of just paddling out than we had gotten through, like, almost throughout the entire...
And honestly, if we weren't so tired, I would have said, hey, this unorthodox method is working of just kind of paddling out, paddling as fast as possible.
For snook.
And for snook. Me personally...
trolling for snook. Very few times have I ever...
Right. I mean, I've heard of kayak anglers. They'll go offshore, and they'll kind of just push along the ledge or by the beach, and they'll try to see what picks it up. But the area that we were at, I really did not expect a snook to be able to bite on a trolling lure. Mind you, the Yozuri was swimming very nicely, so I could see how it works. But on a day like that day, that was just so dead calm, I really thought probably avoid the mangroves and just fish the open water. The only problem on a canoe, it's hard to cover so much ground. So when we're coming back from the mangroves that we were fishing and going back towards the marina area, it was kind of a very, good idea to just troll the lure. Like, why not? Why not troll the lure? It's a calm day. They're probably exploring other grounds that they normally don't explore. And another thing I remember now, the day that we went out before, there was a lot of current when we were catching those slots. No, we would stop paddling,
there were whitecaps out there.
There were whitecaps in the middle of our lagoon. So when you have conditions like that, more likely than not, these fish are going to be hanging out in those dead spots where we fish today. Those little spots where it's kind of offering a little bit of shelter. They could get out of the current, see if they could pick off any baits that are getting pulled in by the current, and not exerting too much energy, because at the end of the day, that's all these fish think about.
The other thing is, my personal guess, is the fact that it was so hot that day. Maybe the shallow water was too much for them, so they're venturing off
into deeper waters,
into like the little deeper pockets that the lagoon has to offer, which is my guess. And then they hear the rattle going on with the lure that we're trolling behind us, that kicks into their instinctual hunger mode.
And I think it has a lot to do also not with the depth, but the fact that the water wasn't moving. So a lot of times it is actually sometimes warmer in the winter months at the bottom of the water. Sometimes the deeper water will hold warmer water. But when the water's just not moving, I feel like they might be going down there and trying to see if they could get out of that putrid just sun cooking up the dead flats there with that muck. And I could see that getting really dirty. I went to go wash my hands for one point in the day, and I got a wick of the mud on my hand, and the only thing I think of is, wow, that's very hot, very steamy mud. So that definitely plays a factor into where the fish end up. And I think the biggest problem that we faced was the dead still wind that we were dealing with. No currents. We just kind of wanted to get out there and get some fish on.
The other thing was, it's that the rest of the week didn't look all too good, at least on the radar. So we figured it's like, hey, let's go crunch it out before the weekend warriors come out and just give it a nice shot. Honestly, it wasn't a bad day.
It wasn't.
Landed some good-sized snook, jumped a few tarpon. Sea trout was a nice
kick. Plus.
We've caught them there before, honestly, but it's not something that happens all too often.
Right. And the cool thing about this area, guys, that we're fishing, it's a nice inshore area. If you're trying to go out there, just have fun on a weekend, kind of like relieve some stress, go chill out. You can never beat just going out there and getting up some snook and tarpon. And like I said, it's like it brings me back to that whole largemouth bass and freshwater fishing type of deal. It's very easy to just go out there, bring some freshwater lures for that matter, and go test your skills for largemouth, test your skills for the bigger snook, it's kind of just like it's almost like for me that was like a keep up of my skills, and to kind of just, you know, practice my pitching, you know, go out there and just have some fun too. So I hope you enjoyed that episode of Casting and Reeling with Austin. Remember guys, get out there, enjoy the water, and I hope to see you again.